In just 41 seconds, what started as lighthearted banter between Stephen Colbert and Samuel L. Jackson transformed into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The legendary actor went from charming guest to furious adversary, launching into a verbal assault that left the studio audience in stunned silence and Colbert scrambling to maintain control of his own show. What you're about to hear is the complete breakdown of how Hollywood's most respected voice became the man who walked away from Stephen Colbert's desk, leaving behind a trail of accusations, profanity, and one of the most uncomfortable moments ever captured on live television. The tension began brewing the moment Jackson settled into the guest chair. Colbert, wearing his trademark smirk, opened with what seemed like innocent commentary about Jackson's latest film project. "Sam, I have to say, watching your new movie, I couldn't help but notice how you've really embraced playing the angry black man character again. It's almost like you found your niche, hasn't it?" Jackson's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his famous intensity flickering behind his eyes. "Stephen, I think you might want to be more careful with your words there. I don't play angry black man characters. I play complex human beings who happen to be black and sometimes happen to be angry for very valid reasons." "Oh, come on," Colbert chuckled, seemingly oblivious to the warning signs. "You know what I mean. The whole motherfucker thing, the righteous indignation, the way you stare down other characters. It's become your brand, hasn't it? I mean, that's what the people want to see from Samuel L. Jackson." The studio audience began to sense something was off. Jackson leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on that familiar edge that moviegoers knew meant trouble was brewing. "My brand? Stephen, let me ask you something. When you see Robert De Niro playing tough guys, do you call that his angry white man brand? When you see Clint Eastwood squinting and being stoic, is that his grumpy white man niche?" Colbert's smile faltered for just a moment, but he pressed on, apparently thinking he could joke his way through the mounting tension. "Well, those guys don't drop F-bombs quite like you do. I mean, you've made motherfucker practically your catchphrase. Surely you can see how that might be seen as, well, a bit one-dimensional." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Jackson's jaw tightened, and those who knew him well could recognize the warning signs of an impending storm. One-dimensional? His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. "Stephen, I've been acting for over 4 decades. I've played everything from drug addicts to superheroes, from Shakespeare to Spike Lee joints. But somehow, when a black actor brings intensity and authenticity to his roles, white commentators like you want to reduce it to a catchphrase and a stereotype." Colbert, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the conversation but unable to stop himself from digging deeper, attempted what he probably thought was a clever redirect. "Now, hold on, Sam. I'm not trying to stereotype anyone. I'm just saying that audiences have come to expect a certain Samuel L. Jackson experience. You can't deny that you've cultivated this image of the badass who doesn't take shit from anyone. There's nothing wrong with that. It's made you very wealthy." That last comment hung in the air like a lit fuse waiting to reach dynamite. Jackson's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to that menacing whisper that had terrified audiences in countless films. "Wealthy? So now we're talking about money? Stephen, let me tell you something about wealth. I didn't get wealthy by playing caricatures of black men for white audiences' entertainment. I got successful by being authentic, by bringing truth to characters that lazy writers and directors wanted to make into stereotypes." The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Colbert, his usual confidence beginning to crack, made perhaps the worst decision of his career by doubling down. "But Sam, surely you have to admit that there's a formula to what you do. The righteous anger, the profanity, the intimidation factor. It's all very calculated, isn't it? Very performative?" Jackson's hand gripped the arm of his chair, his knuckles visibly tense. "Performative?" The word came out like a challenge, loaded with decades of frustration with Hollywood's treatment of black actors. "Stephen, you want to talk about performative? Let's talk about how you perform this liberal, progressive persona on your show, while simultaneously reducing accomplished black actors to stereotypes and catchphrases. That's some real fucking performance art right there." The studio audience gasped audibly at Jackson's use of profanity. But more than that, they were reacting to the raw emotion and accusation in his voice. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to seeing on late-night television. This was something real, something uncomfortable, something that was spiraling rapidly out of control. Colbert's face flushed red, his carefully crafted television persona beginning to crack under pressure. Now wait just a minute, Sam. I think you're mischaracterizing what I'm trying to say here. I have nothing but respect for your work and your contributions to cinema. Respect? Jackson's laugh was bitter, cutting through the studio like a blade. Stephen, respect doesn't look like reducing a man's life work to tired stereotypes and then telling him he should be grateful for the money it's made him. You want to know what's really performative? It's this whole setup where you invite black guests onto your show and then try to put them in neat little boxes that make your predominantly white audience comfortable. The confrontation was escalating beyond anything anyone in the studio had expected, and Colbert found himself in the unprecedented position of being publicly challenged and intellectually outmaneuvered on his own show. His attempts at damage control were only making things worse, and Jackson showed no signs of backing down. If anything, he seemed to be just getting started. His decades of experience with Hollywood's casual racism finally finding a target worthy of his legendary intensity. But what came next would transform this already uncomfortable confrontation into something that would be talked about for years to come. Colbert, his media-trained instincts finally kicking in, attempted to regain control with what he clearly thought was a disarming smile. Look, Sam, I think we're getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a step back and... No, Stephen, we're not taking a step back. Jackson's voice cut through Colbert's attempt at de-escalation like a machete through silk. You opened this door, and now we're going to walk through it. You want to talk about my brand? Let's talk about yours. You built your career playing a fake right-wing pundit, then transitioned to playing a fake liberal host. The common thread? You've always been fake as hell. The audience was now completely silent, some people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the entertaining friction they occasionally saw on talk shows. This was personal, brutal, and getting worse by the second. Colbert's eyes darted toward his producers off stage, clearly looking for some kind of lifeline. But Jackson wasn't finished. You know what's really rich about this whole conversation? Jackson continued, his famous intensity now fully unleashed. You're sitting there trying to lecture me about being performative, while you're the most artificial motherfucker on television. At least when I play a character, the audience knows it's a movie. Your whole show is you pretending to give a damn about social issues while you perpetuate the same tired bullshit that's been keeping black actors in boxes for decades. Colbert's face had gone from red to pale, sweat beginning to form on his forehead under the studio lights. Sam, I really think you're overreacting here. I was just trying to have a conversation about your career. Overreacting? Jackson's laugh was sharp, humorless. Stephen, you just spent the last 5 minutes trying to reduce my entire body of work to a stereotype and a catchphrase, and now you're telling me I'm overreacting? That's some white privilege bullshit right there. You think because you smile when you say ignorant shit, that makes it okay? The camera operators were getting shots they never expected, capturing every micro-expression of shock and discomfort from both the host and the audience. Colbert was now visibly sweating, his usual composure completely shattered. I never said anything about race. You didn't have to, Jackson exploded, finally allowing his full fury to surface. That's the beauty of liberal racism, isn't it? You never have to say the quiet part out loud. You just smile and ask why the angry black man can't be more. What's the word you people like to use? Articulate? More palatable? More grateful for the opportunities he's been given? The studio felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Even the band members looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to keep the cameras rolling or cut to commercial. Colbert, desperate to salvage something from this disaster, made perhaps his worst decision yet. Sam, I think you're reading way too much into this. I've had dozens of black guests on this show, and we've never had a problem. Dozens of black guests? Jackson's voice rose to a level that made several audience members flinch. Oh, well, then you must be an expert on the black experience. Tell me, Stephen, how many of those dozens of guests called you out on your bullshit? How many of them smiled politely while you reduced them to whatever comfortable stereotype made your audience feel good about themselves? Colbert was now completely out of his depth, his media training failing him spectacularly. I really don't think that's fair. Fair? Jackson stood up from his chair, his imposing frame casting a shadow over Colbert's desk. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that every time a black actor brings intensity to a role, white critics call it angry? Is it fair that when we demand respect and authenticity, people like you label it as difficult or problematic? Is it fair that I have to sit here and listen to some privileged white comedian tell me what my own career means? The audience was now actively uncomfortable, some people looking toward the exits. This had moved far beyond entertainment into something raw and real that many of them weren't prepared to witness. Colbert, his voice now shaky, tried one more time to redirect. Sam, please, can we just... No, we can't just anything. Jackson's voice boomed through the studio. You started this conversation, Stephen. You brought up my brand, my niche, my supposed one-dimensionality. You made it about race the second you decided that my intensity and authenticity were somehow different from what white actors bring to their roles. So don't you dare try to just your way out of this now. Colbert looked like a deer in headlights, completely unprepared for this level of confrontation. His usual wit and charm had abandoned him entirely, leaving him exposed as exactly what Jackson was accusing him of being, a performer who had never been challenged on his own stage. I didn't mean for this to go in this direction, Colbert stammered, his voice barely audible. Jackson leaned forward, placing both hands on Colbert's desk, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper that had made him famous in films like Pulp Fiction. Stephen, let me tell you what direction this is going. You're going to sit there and realize that you just fucked with the wrong actor on the wrong night. You thought you could make me the entertainment, reduce me to your little sound bites and stereotypes for your audience's amusement. But I'm not here for your entertainment, and I'm damn sure not here to make you or your viewers comfortable. The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of the cameras and lights. Even the production staff had stopped moving, transfixed by what was unfolding. Jackson straightened up, looking down at Colbert with a mixture of contempt and disappointment. You know what the real tragedy is here, Stephen? You actually had the opportunity to have a real conversation with someone who's lived through 4 decades of this industry's bullshit. Instead, you chose to play into the same tired narratives that have been holding black actors back since the beginning of Hollywood. That's not just ignorant, that's fucking pathetic. But Jackson wasn't done yet, and what he was about to say next would push this confrontation to its explosive conclusion. Jackson's eyes swept across the stunned studio audience before fixing back on Colbert with laser-like intensity. You know what, Stephen? I've been in this business long enough to recognize exactly what you are. You're the kind of liberal who thinks having black friends gives you a pass to say ignorant shit. You're the kind of white man who believes his good intentions absolve him of his impact. And worst of all, you're the kind of coward who hides behind comedy when someone calls you on your bullshit. Colbert's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. The beads of sweat on his forehead had multiplied, and his hands were visibly shaking as he gripped the edge of his desk. The audience sat in absolute silence, witnessing what was clearly the complete dismantling of a television host on his own show. Let me tell you something about authentic anger. Since you seem so fascinated by it, Jackson continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades of frustration. My anger isn't performative, Stephen. It's earned. It comes from sitting in rooms full of executives who look just like you, listening to them explain why I can't play certain roles because I'm too intense or too threatening. It comes from watching talented black actors get pigeonholed into the same 3 character types, while mediocre white actors get to play Shakespeare. Jackson began pacing behind his chair, his commanding presence filling the entire studio. Every eye was on him, including those of the crew members who had completely abandoned any pretense of normal television protocol. You want to know what's really fucking performative? It's this whole liberal guilt theater you white folks put on. You invite us onto your shows. You ask us about our experiences. You nod sympathetically, and then you go right back to perpetuating the same goddamn systems that keep us marginalized in the first place. Colbert finally managed to find his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Sam, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Jackson's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Stephen, the only misunderstanding here is that you thought you could pull this shit on me and get away with it. You thought you could reduce Samuel L. Jackson to a catchphrase and a stereotype, and I'd just smile and go along with it for the sake of promoting my movie. That's where you fucked up. The actor stopped pacing and planted himself directly in front of Colbert's desk, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the cowering host. Let me be crystal clear about something. I didn't get where I am by being palatable to white audiences. I didn't build my career by making people like you comfortable. I got here by being authentic, by bringing truth to every character I play, and by refusing to apologize for taking up space in rooms where people would rather I stay quiet. Colbert was now visibly trembling, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. Please, Sam, can we just what? Pretend this conversation didn't happen? Move on to some softball questions about my latest movie? Go to commercial so you can regroup and figure out how to spin this? Jackson's voice rose to a thunderous level that seemed to shake the very foundations of the studio. Fuck that, Stephen. You opened this door, and now you're going to walk through it with me. Several audience members were now actively trying to leave their seats, but security was preventing anyone from moving, creating an even more claustrophobic atmosphere. Jackson noticed the movement and addressed it directly. Oh, don't worry, folks. I'm not going to hurt your precious host here, but I am going to make sure he understands exactly what he's done. He turned back to Colbert with renewed intensity. Stephen, what you did tonight wasn't just disrespectful to me. It was disrespectful to every black actor who's ever had to sit in that chair and smile while being reduced to a stereotype. It was disrespectful to every performer who's ever been told their authenticity is too much for mainstream audiences. Jackson leaned down until he was at eye level with Colbert, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper that had made him legendary. But most importantly, Stephen, what you did tonight was show your true colors. You revealed that underneath all that liberal posturing and social justice rhetoric, you're just another privileged white man who thinks he can define black excellence on his own terms. The studio was so quiet that the sound of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Colbert looked like he was about to either faint or vomit, his face having gone from red to pale to slightly green. Jackson straightened up, his decision clearly made. You know what? I'm done here. Jackson's voice carried a finality that everyone in the studio could feel. I came here tonight to talk about my new film, to share some stories, maybe have a few laughs. Instead, I got to experience firsthand the kind of casual racism that black actors deal with every goddamn day in this industry. He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Stephen, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember how it feels to be completely out of your depth, to have someone refuse to play by your rules, to be challenged by someone you thought you could control, because that's what you just put me through. Colbert finally managed to speak, his voice cracking with desperation. Sam, please don't leave. We can work through this. Work through this? Jackson tossed his microphone onto Colbert's desk with enough force to make the host jump. Stephen, there's nothing to work through. You showed me exactly who you are tonight, and I'm showing you exactly who I am. The difference is, I'm not ashamed of what you're seeing. Jackson stepped back from the desk and looked directly into the main camera, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in the entertainment industry. To anyone watching this at home, let this be a lesson. Don't ever let anyone, I don't care how liberal they claim to be, how much they talk about diversity and inclusion, don't ever let anyone reduce you to their comfortable stereotype. Your authenticity is not performative. Your truth is not a brand. And your dignity is not negotiable. He turned back to Colbert one final time, his expression a mixture of disappointment and contempt. Stephen, you had the chance to have a real conversation tonight. Instead, you chose to perpetuate the same tired bullshit that's been holding black performers back for generations. That's on you, not me. Jackson began walking toward the exit, his stride confident and purposeful. As he reached the edge of the set, he paused and called back over his shoulder. Oh, and Stephen? Next time you want to have a conversation about black authenticity, maybe try talking to a black person first instead of just assuming you understand what it means. With that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the set of The Late Show, leaving behind a studio full of shocked audience members, a traumatized host, and footage that would become one of the most talked about moments in late-night television history. Colbert sat alone at his desk, the weight of what had just transpired settling over him like a suffocating blanket, finally understanding that he had just been schooled by one of Hollywood's most respected actors, and that he had absolutely deserved every second of it.